Hello and welcome into today's edition of the Arizona State Sun Devils Insider Podcast. My name is Kevin Hicks. I am your lead beat writer for the Arizona State Sun Devils on SI. And today I am joined by Josh Crawford, who is a beat writer for Baylor Bears on SI. And I joined him on his podcast yesterday. Very graciously had me on, and he wanted to return the favor today. So we're going to be talking about the matchup from the perspective of Baylor. And Josh, thanks for coming on today. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Like I said, I had a lot of fun chopping it up with you yesterday. Like you mentioned, doing a little home and home. We both know this is a really, important game for both teams. Conference opener for both teams. I like what you said about Devin Dampier yesterday, but I do think this probably still is the best two quarterbacks in the conference. And like we both know, it should be an entertaining game. It might not be a lot of stops, hopefully some timely stops, but it should be, like I said, entertaining if nothing else. So I'm excited to watch the game, and I'm excited to chop it up with you about what Baylor brings to the table, man.
Absolutely, me as well. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the official injury reports for both Baylor and ASU were released last night. Baylor obviously had a much shorter list, and there weren't really many key players that were questionable or out for them. As for Arizona State, three starting players are either questionable or out already. Xavier Alford, the starting safety, is out. Jalen Moss, the starting slot receiver, is out, and the starting nickelback in Montana Warren is questionable, but the prognosis didn't sound too promising for him as well. Uh, Josh, what's your perspective on how Baylor can attack the Arizona State defense that could be shorthanded?
Talking about those particular absences in the secondary, and talking with some scouts before the season, one thing that they wanted to see improvement with Sawyer Robertson was downfield accuracy. He doesn't have a cannon of an arm like a Sam Levitt, but he is a guy that's it's an upper mid tier arm. There's not a lot of throws that he can make on the football field. So in year two in Jake Spitaval's system, like I told you yesterday, he's really opened it up for Sawyer. Like I said, having the summer and the spring, knowing that he's the starter. I think you've seen it in the play style. The first two games that Baylor played, those would have been Sawyer Robertson's most pass attempts throughout the season. In the regular season last year, he had 51 and 9. He threw it 51 times against LSU in the bowl game. But yeah, and like I said, some of that stuff is attributed to Baylor having to play from behind in both of these games. Undoubtedly the strength of this team in terms of explosive plays is Sawyer Robertson. Bryson Washington is a great back, a guy that I think could be a top 75 pick probably next year when he comes out. But he's not necessarily a burner, a guy that's going to just break off explosive plays by the 60 and 70 yards like a Relief Brown. He's more of like more of a chain mover, three down back, or more of a workhorse. So if this offense wants to get to an explosive play, the best thing is to put the ball in Sawyer Robertson's hands. So talking about those injuries, he has had that downfield ball placement jump, I believe. It hasn't been perfect. He did throw two interceptions versus Sanford, but I do think that it will make Spitaval and Sawyer a little bit more confident to replace to attack downfield, especially in the seams to where your nickel and your safeties, your starting safety, starting nickel would be. And to maybe try to just be a little bit more, like I said, aggressive and trying to thread the needle and go to some of these receivers and man to man situations or tight coverage windows.
That's great breakdown, Josh. And that kind of is a perfect segue into what you've described as possibly Baylor's most talented player, their most important player overall in tight end Michael Trigg. Obviously, very talented player all around. He's a tight end that moves like a receiver. And I actually wanted to bring in a quote that I got from Arizona State defensive coordinator Brian Ward. We talked to him on Tuesday, and I got to ask him about Trigg, and this is what he said. He said, "Yeah, big body, former high school basketball player. You know, guys, the guy who knows how to separate. He has great catch radius. He has all the tricks in terms of getting separation late, especially when he's covered. He presents a lot of challenges, and he's big, rangy. He runs like a wideout. So." When you have a guy like that can run like a wideout, can separate on the back end of routes like that, has a massive catch radius, really can bring down any 50-50 ball in the books. That's going to present a major challenge for any defense, especially with his build. He's about 6'5", I believe. So Arizona State's probably going to be very, very challenged in terms of their approach in terms of covering him because he's too big to put a DB on him consistently. That's just how it is. It doesn't matter how skilled the DB is in different coverages. It's just not going to work. It's just not sustainable. So they're probably going to have to put a linebacker on him, and in most cases, he's probably going to beat out the backer with the way he moves. So, how do you think he will factor into the matchup?
Honestly, I mean, I'm a lover of good football, but I think based on, like I said, doing some research about Zayman Alfred after we talked and just knowing like he was a preseason All Big 12 guy, that was probably the most compatible body type to cover a Michael Trigg in terms of the coverage ability, but also to somebody that that's pretty stout, 220, 230, I believe, that wasn't going to get out physical at the catch point. So with him being out, I don't know if you all have necessarily one singular body type that can go blow for blow and trig, or if you want to run cover zero, cover one stuff. I don't know if you guys have a guy that you feel comfortable with and man covers that can cover Michael Trigg. You know, we talked a little bit about him before we got on. Like you know, the DC said, uber talented guy, top 50 recruit coming out of high school, had stops at Ole Miss and USC. Especially talking about Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, who we know a lot of things about Lane Kiffin, especially being a native Tennessean, but it's undeniable the offensive mind that he has. So for Lane Kiffin to seek out Michael Trigg, that also just lets you know that hey, this is the type of guy that um, high flight offensive minds covet that body type and that separation. Watching Trigg up close in practice in the preseason, he does move like a receiver. That's something that kind of gets overused a little bit, but he really broke out last year and looking the way that he kind of worked on his body over the summer and in preseason, he does look like somebody that, like I said, you know, maybe a little hyperbolic, but like a Jimmy Graham back in the day with the Saints, to where like you can split him out wide, and it's not necessarily he's not a tight end out there. He's just an athlete. He's just a big body, he almost like an X receiver out there that you put in the slot. So like I told you earlier, Sawyer went to him early and often in the Auburn game, 16 targets because tight ends you usually operate as just that security blanket in general, but like he's just definitely a mismatch problem especially in the middle of the field, especially where your injuries are coming in with your safety and your nickels, two guys that operate in the middle of the field normally. So I think to flip it on its head, Baylor does not have a corner that can cover Jordan Tyson 1-on-1, so I expect a lot of zone coverage, a lot of bracket coverage. And with the injuries that you all have sustained, it'll probably be a similar situation for Michael Trigg over the middle of the field.
Yeah, that was great, Josh. That was awesome. I really like the Jimmy Graham comparison. I think that that's a very realistic one. Uh, Certainly going to be challenging for Arizona State. He's probably the player that is like if you had to choose one X factor on the Baylor team, like offense and defense, he's probably the one guy you look at, and he could be the difference between winning the game and losing the game for the Bears. Uh, but that was a perfect segue mentioning the Baylor defense into discussing the struggles and potential uh, upside of the Baylor defense because I still believe that there's talent there. I believe that they could present challenges to Sam Levitt specifically in terms of how they Dave Aranda's defense runs a lot of simulated pressures and disguised coverages. It's meant to just kind of confuse the quarterback. That's kind of like that's a little bit what like Brian Ward likes to run as well. But Sam Levitt, he was not turnover prone last year, but this year he's thrown three pretty ill-advised interceptions. He really had the absolute worst game of his career against Mississippi State in terms of seeing the field. He was obviously very shaken by the environment, by the game script getting thrown out of rhythm, by Kyson Brown exiting the game early. What do you see out of Sam Levitt, and how do you think the Baylor defense can attack him and create some mistakes to put themselves in high leverage situations offensively.
So, and it's kind of like I told you, it's been frustrating for Baylor fans. The fact that Dave Aranda is a defensive guy, he made his bones as a DC at LSU. He was he's a former former linebacker coach himself. Just how porous his defense has been, especially in stopping the run. So with that, the run defense, in terms of the front three or front four, not that strong. Just secondary, it's not that great. But they have a lot of run and hit athletes at linebacker. One of them just went down, Phoenix Jackson. It looks like he suffered a season-ending injury. That's the Fresno State transfer. That had kind of been, a pseudo starter at one of those linebacker positions. Travion Barnes hasn't played as much as I think people would expect it, considering the production at FIU. But one thing that was really concerning versus SMU was what we saw with Auburn was Jackson Darnold doing a lot of damage with his legs. Now, Auburn did a lot more, and Hugh Freeze, as another noted offensive mind, he did a lot more design runs with Jackson Arnold. I didn't know Jackson Arnold was that mobile, honestly. We didn't see a lot of that at Oklahoma. But Kevin Jennings, I would definitely say is a more dynamic athlete than Jackson Arnold. So I was definitely worried going into that game that whether it was scripted or, just getting out of the pocket, that he could do a lot more damage with his legs. But that was not the case. I think they got 3 sacks on Kevin Jennings. Sack yardage counts in college football. I think he ended up with 13 rushes for 23 yards. I think his longest was like 8 yards. So that was really encouraging. Like you said, like I told you yesterday, you got the transfer edge rushers in Amarion Winston, Matthew Fobbs White, but also again Travion Barnes, Keaton Thomas. You got a lot of guys that, like you said, whether it's a spy situation or like you said with these simulated pressures to where you load the box or you run like a mug front and then you drop. I do trust the ability because I haven't seen ASU run a ton of design stuff with Sam Levitt either. So I see that, you know, Baylor really surprised me, honestly, with their ability to contain Kevin Jennings' legs. And like you mentioned, that's I think one thing that I saw in the tape against Mississippi State that Sam Levitt, that's a Southerner, SEC ball is a different breed. He wasn't able to turn the corner on SEC athletes, at least in that game, and I think that's where he got to thrive. He has the arm to, but he kind of thrives improvising, making plays outside of the pocket, rolling left or rolling right, making those off schedule throws. And if Baylor can keep him in the pocket or, bang him when he needs to be in terms of not allowing him to, like you said, get outside the pocket and create with his legs or his arms, I think that'll go a long way towards stymieing one of the best quarterbacks in college football. So honestly, I think that looking at the Mississippi State tape would be a good deal for them because again, Kevin Jennings, I think he was one of 5 guys to throw for 3,000 and rush for 700 last year. That was a big win to limit his leg, the damage that he did on the ground. So they'll have to repeat that same success with Sam Levin.
Absolutely. And you made a great point by with his improv game. ASU's offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo has repeatedly been absolutely raving about his ability as like an off-script quarterback, just throwing off platform, making crazy throws with different arm angles. He really does make a lot of NFL throws, and also his athleticism is very very underrated. Like you said, didn't really show against Mississippi State, but he's kind of more of like the Daniel Jones kind of athlete, where like he's deceptively fast. You don't really think he's fast just looking at him plain view, but he can accelerate pretty quickly. He has some very, very refined elusive elusivity. He has spin moves in his arsenal. He has some jukes in his arsenal. He knows how to get down without taking contact most of the time. Uh, that's just a very, very strong weapon to have, especially when you have as many dynamic backs as you do in the Arizona State backfield. Uh, let's go into the X factors for Baylor. Just give me one offensive player and one defensive player that you think might not be on the radar as much as some of the top three, four players on each side that could impact the game.
Okay, we give him Trig enough love. We know how at this point he supersedes X Factor. I will go with Ashton Hawkins. Josh Cameron is the undisputed number one for Baylor. Wideout one, he had 10 touchdowns last year. He had two, I believe, in the Sanford game. I think he's up to five this year. So we know he's going to draw the main quarterback assignment. Ashton Hawkins was a guy that he's the starting slot for Baylor. Didn't even know he was going to be able to be eligible this year. He got eligibility early in fall camp, benefiting from the 6 year senior rule. And we talk about those injuries in the secondary for you all. Ash Hawkins is probably the fastest receiver that Baylor has. And again, he works over the middle of the field, which is, like I said, where y'all have some injuries at. So short crossers, slant routes, finding holes in zone coverage. That's what Ashton Hawkins does. And he has ability to make people miss an open field and really do damage after the catch. So we talk about Michael Trigg. I love him because he's a guy that can separate but also be at the catch point. But Ashton Hawkins is the one true guy I think that has a lot of ability, like I said, to do damage once the ball in his hands. I would honestly like to see them do a little bit more in terms of like end arounds or screens with him. That's not really how Spitaval's offense is set up. But in the middle of the field, like I said, with those injuries that y'all have, with some guys that are experienced but haven't had a lot of playing time, Hawkins is a guy that can make one or two guys miss and turn a 10, 20-yard game into a touchdown for Baylor. So I think that, like I said, a lot of the focus will be on Cameron, will be on Trigg, it will be on Bryson Washington. But Ashton Hawkins, with the level of experience he has with this offense, with Sawyer Robertson, he's not to be slept on either. So I definitely think that that's somebody that he's not going to be at the top of the scouting report, but there definitely needs to be an ID for him over the middle of the field for the ASU defense. Now for defense. I want to say Jackie Marshall. He's probably the most important. His health is probably the most important because he got hurt against Auburn. He played 6 snaps against SMU. Played a little bit more against Sanford. This will be week 3 of his recovery from an ankle sprain. He should be back to at least 89, 90%. So that'll he's probably their most important. So an X factor. Let's see. King Thomas is gonna be good. You know what I'll say? DJ Coleman. DJ Coleman started safety for Baylor, started free safety for Baylor, made some really great open tackles in the SMU game, in a very critical PBU in either the fourth quarter or overtime. One of the drives that ended up stymieing SMU and holding them to 3, and then forcing them to kick a field goal in overtime, and then forcing and that miss led to Baylor being able to win overtime on a field goal. And I talked to you at length at this point. Bella's second, their corners, LeVar Thurman and Tevin Williams. Tevin Williams is experienced. He's solid. He's probably suited to be more of a cornerback too or a nickel. And LeVar Thornton, he's a long, lengthy guy, but he just hasn't played enough and doesn't have enough, I think, short area quickness and reliability, honestly, in coverage to be somebody that you can resist the run man coverage with. So DJ Coleman, a guy that, like I just mentioned with Jordan Tyson, you're gonna have to bracket him. You're not gonna want to throw a man run man coverage on him, and he's a guy that has the ability to play over top. He had a PBU. And I guess I think he had a couple of PBUs in that SMU game. But he also has the physicality to come downhill, like I said, in the run game. So we talk about like, the explosive plays with Jordan Tyson and wanting to limit those, but also in that run game with the athletes that y'all have out of the backfield, with Kanye Udo, with Relief Brown, he's somebody like we talked about that counter versus Texas State last week. DJ Coleman can turn that into a 20-yard game and not where Relief Brown is hitting his head on the goalpost. So, transparently, with the stable of back that y'all got, I don't expect Baylor's run defense to thrive. Or honestly, I don't expect them to be. I expect Jordan Tyson to have a big game, but the key for them will be limiting the explosive plays, and DJ Coleman can do that in the run game coming down. He'll be also playing over the top and playing out of the roof, in the deep thirds, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great analysis once again. Uh, the thing that Mississippi State did really well outside of just throwing Sam Levitt completely out of rhythm was limiting the explosive from Jordan Tyson. I still believe he had 7 catches for about 70 yards. He had almost all the production in the receiving game that game. but he didn't have an explosive play all day. He did catch a touchdown, but it was just a 3 yarder. Uh, I believe it was. I think it was. I don't even remember what route it was, but it was just like at the front of the goal line. He just snatched it up. It was over the plane, and it was just a touchdown as is. He didn't have to do any much. But um, this kind of leads into the final parts of the show. Josh, what's your prediction for the game right now? Whether it's your winner, general score. I know we did this just a couple days ago, but for those that haven't had a chance to check it out, what are your thoughts on the way you're leaning in terms of the final result?
So I picked Baylor in the first three games. Um, Homer, you know what I'm saying. But also I did. Again, I did not think Jackson Arnold was going to present. I thought it would have been Eric Coleman and Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton that would have did more damage than that would have did more damage than Jackson Arnold in that game. So with again facing the best receiver in the country versus the secondary in which Baylor has played, I just cannot see myself declaring a Baylor win, honestly. And again, combine that with one of the few quarterbacks that I see, Sam Levitt, being that what I see being more talented than Sawyer Robertson on Baylor's schedule, I can in good faith pick Baylor. Now again, the injuries that y'all got in the secondary and the Jalen Moss too is particularly big because um, that'll allow more attention to be dedicated to Jordan Tyson and not necessarily be super worried about other guys making plays. But I just think the run game that y'all have, the explosive plays, the explosive play potential with Jordan Tyson, and this is Sam Levitt in itself. Like we talked, I compare him to I like you said the Daniel Jones comparison because I say Baker Mayfield, but he's a different level of athlete, I believe, than Baker Mayfield. So maybe like a Baker Mayfield, Ronnie Leonard kind of mix there, because Sam Levitt is a guy that has a powerful lower frame, and I've seen him, like you said. Um, he's a great watch. I like watching Sam Levitt. Even like I really like learning about him early last season and going into the playoffs. So I will go. I think I win 35. I think I win 34-31 Arizona State, and I'll stick with that. It'll be like I said, both teams. It'll be a shootout. Um, I think that I think that Baylor can get after Sam Levitt early, or it would be even more points on the board. But ultimately, I just think there's this too big a talent gap at critical positions for Baylor to pull this out. So maybe I'm doing some reverse psychology. As journalists of our teams are not necessarily subscribed to be friends or fans. But I am hoping that I can maybe my first non-Baylor prediction of the year can go the opposite way.
Yeah, I'm not discounting a Baylor victory at all. I picked Arizona State to win as well, but I'm not nearly as confident in it right now as I was 3 weeks ago. Uh, I wasn't. I knew Baylor was going to be a good team going into the season, but seeing the way the run defense performed against Auburn kind of raised my eyebrows for me. But the Arizona State injuries, the loss to Mississippi State, there's some question marks there now that weren't there previously. And also, you saw Baylor's just absolute tenacity and explosiveness in that comeback victory against SMU. You can't let that escape your mind. They were down by 2 scores with 5 minutes left in the game. They were able to come back, storm back, because down 2 possessions with that little time left, that rarely ever comes to fruition in terms of a
I was about
comeback.
to say Arizona State, even if they get a good jump in this game, um, they'll need to keep their necks on Baylor. This like you just mentioned, they've been behind in 2 games this season, to their 2 power conference games this season. Baylor's not going to quit, especially with their home crowd, because they get down. Um, Sawyer Robertson, like I said, I think the biggest that I think I mentioned in the article, y'all check that out on our respective sites. The poise, the intangible stuff, I think it's been the biggest jump for him. Especially with the play style that they have. Obviously not going to be ideal, but with the way the defense is set up, it's going to fall a lot on Sawyer Robertson to make timely throws, to generate explosive plays. And it's not a situation where you looked at the offense like a Notre Dame per se. It's not necessarily built with a freshman quarterback to be playing from behind. Baylor is comfortable playing from behind. Even in that Auburn game, they went punch for punch for Auburn in that second half before Jackson Arnold sealed it. So yeah, like you said, even if Arizona State gets a nice jump, Um, don't rule out a comeback because, like I said, this is a tenacious group and they showed it against SMU.
Yeah, I wanted to just one last thing before we conclude today's show. I wanted to talk about how really at the end of the day the pressure's on ASU to start the game off right. The pressure's not on
Mm,
Baylor because we looked at. I feel like this could end up being a good comparison. Last season's Big 12 opener, the very first conference game that ASU ever played in the Big 12, they made a trip to Texas to play Texas Tech. They went down 14-0 in the first quarter off of a Sam Levitt interception and some defensive lapses, and they were never able to truly catch up in that game. They did lose 30-22, but it was a two-score game with just about 5 minutes left, and I think they scored a late touchdown to give them a chance, and they never got the ball back. So I think that it's paramount to get an early lead for the Sun Devils and to force Baylor to throw the ball as much as possible and just operate in that bend don't break mentality that they have. Um, if they get behind, who's to say Baylor's defense doesn't get hot and start making plays, start getting stops, start gaining confidence? Uh, and as Sawyer Robertson eases into the game, it's going to make it a lot easier to get Bryson Washington going as well. Like there's so many different factors you can look at,
yes, sir.
and really the pressure's on ASU, especially as the defending Big 12 champs. They really need to assert themselves very early in the game, in my mind. If you have anything else to add on top of that, Josh, go right ahead.
No, like you mentioned, like I mentioned earlier, the way that Bryson Washington is set up in terms of the type of running back that he is, Baylor, it's not all on Sawyer Robertson. They can very easily play from ahead in terms of just getting grinding out these 4 or 5 yard games with Bryson Washington, chewing clock. They're not predicated on having the explosive plays is not the only way the offense moves. So no, if yeah, I would, like I said, obviously the football game got to play out. I would like to advise Arizona State, like I said, to try to get an early jump and try to silence that McLean Stadium crowd because, like I said, between the run game that Baylor has and the development of the offensive line, they're not great, but they showed a lot more. They showed a lot of improvement in the run game specifically. Versus SMU, they're not great in pass pro still. But if they can play with a lead, they can do a lot of damage on the ground in terms of time possession. If you're staying ahead of the chains, if you get Bryson Washington in these second and sevens and third and fours, yeah, and even Sawyer Robinson is a guy that can do some damage with his legs if you're running man coverage. So yeah, I think that it's been out of necessity the amount of times they've had to throw the ball so far. Bryson Washington hasn't had really a breakout game yet against a power conference opponent. He had 135 versus Stanford. And like I said, if they have the ability, even if it's tied or even if it's something that where he's gashing this ASU defense, he's a guy that is one of the best backs in the country, and he can, in the way that we think about Sawyer Robertson to the ground. If Sawyer Robertson can win you a game, Bryson Washington can ice you a game, by chewing up clock and just continuing to move the chains in the run game.
Absolutely. Josh, thank you so much for coming on today, helping me out with this show. Sometimes it's tough to come up with stuff on my own. So I appreciate your analysis very much. You obviously are a wealth of information, and I hope that each and every one of you that watch this enjoys it. Please give Josh a follow on X/Twitter as well at jcrawford5656. And uh, we'll be catching up soon, Josh. Thank you so much for tuning in today, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Boom.